The Milky Way had been quiet for 12,000 years, ever since the eternal curators declared war biologically obsolete and turned the galaxy into a museum. Planets were frozen in perfect stasis, species preserved in amber dreams, weapons outlawed under pain of instant molecular disassembly. Then humanity woke up. We weren't supposed to. Earth had been sealed behind a chronolock in 1987, a quaint pre-space civilization the curators saved from its own nukes the way you save a beetle in loose scythe, but some junior archivists forgot to account for compound interest on stubbornness. 140 generations of bottled-up spite fermented inside the lock until the seal cracked like cheap glass. The first thing we did when the sky opened again wasn't scream or pray. It was laugh. A raw, ugly, beautiful sound that rolled across every dormant cum channel the curators had left monitoring us. On the museum moon of archival prime, Curator Prime Eleria 11, watched the laughter waveform spike and felt something she had no word for crawl across her crystalline lattice. She dispatched a pacification fleet of silver spheres that could unmake stars with a thought. They arrived in Seoul expecting smoke and tears. Instead they found shipyards, tens of thousands of them. Every asteroid, moon, and derelict hulk humanity had ever touched had been quietly hollowed out and turned into foundries while the curators were busy admiring their own reflection. The pacification spheres broadcast surrender demands and got back a single video file. A gray-haired woman in a welding mask flipping them off with both hands while sparks showered around her like angry stars. Her name was Captain Delilah Rose, last survivor of the pre-lock U.S. Space Force, and she'd spent the last century teaching teenagers how to turn wedding rings into railgun slugs because gold makes great sabo material. Out in the Oort cloud, a kid named Ravi Patel, who'd never seen a tree in his life, flew a courier skiff made from soda cans and spite straight into the lead curator sphere, detonating a warhead built from the plutonium of every smoke detector humanity ever threw away. The explosion wasn't big enough to scratch the sphere's hull, but the electromagnetic scream it let out fried the curator's perfect quantum harmony for 3 full seconds, long enough for every dormant human sleeper ship to light its drives at once. 100 million engines burning funeral white, turning the outer dark into a sunrise the curators literally could not compute. Illyria 11 tried reason. She offered immortality, infinite pleasure, entire galaxies to play with if we'd just go back to sleep. Delilah's answer came from the bridge of the hastily rechristened battle wagon, CSS, fuck around and find out. Lady, we've been asleep for 12,000 years. We're cranky, we're caffeinated, and we've got a to-do list longer than your arm. Step aside. The war lasted 11 minutes. Not because we were stronger, the curators could still blink fleets out of existence, but because every time they erased a human ship, 2 more crawled out of the wreckage wearing the dead-like armor and screaming old protest songs at the top of their lungs. The curators had preserved us as a warning about violence. They never imagined we'd read the label and decide it sounded like a promise. When Illyria 11's flagship began to fracture under boarding pods made from school buses, in prayer, she finally understood the mistake. You can curate a species that treats extinction as a suggestion. The last thing the curators ever heard was Delilah's voice across every frequency, warm and tired and absolutely certain. Hey universe! Humanity's back from vacation, and we brought souvenirs. Then the sky filled with teeth and the museum burned beautifully. And somewhere, a 12,000-year overdue laugh finally echoed all the way to Andromeda, sharp enough to cut God. The curators never bothered to learn our names, so we started giving theirs back to them in pieces. 11 minutes after the museum caught fire, Delilah Rose stood on the cracked observation deck of the fuck around and find out, staring at the drifting corpse of a curator sphere the size of Manhattan, while blood dripped off her chin from a split lip she refused to let the medics touch. The sphere's mirrored surface was spider-webbed with fractures, each crack reflecting a different human face, screaming or laughing or both. She couldn't stop looking at one reflection in particular, a little girl with Delilah's eyes and her mother's crooked smile. Frozen midway from a photograph taken in 1986, the year before the chronolock snapped shut. Delilah had welded the photo inside her welding mask the day the lock broke. Because some things you can't trust to memory when memory is the only country you have left. Ravi Patel found her there, 19 years old and already missing 3 fingers from the smoke detector bomb. He carried 2 steaming mugs that smelled like burnt soy and desperation. Real coffee had died with the bees. They're asking for orders, Captain, he said, voice cracking on the last word, because he still couldn't believe anyone was stupid enough to call him soldier. Delilah took the mug but didn't drink. Orders, she repeated, tasting the word like spoiled meat. Kid, The last order I got was hold my beer in a dive bar in Jacksonville the night the sky turned inside out. Everything after that's been improvisation." Ravi hesitated, then asked the question everyone was choking on. "What do we do when we run out of curators to kill?" Delilah finally looked at him, really looked, and saw the trimmer in his hands that had nothing to do with vacuum or cold. She thought of her own daughter, Sarah, who would have been his age if time had kept its promises. "Then we start forgiving ourselves," she said quietly, "and that's the part that's gonna hurt worse than anything they ever did to us." Below decks, in the converted hydroponics bay that now served as both chapel and brig, Marcus Priest Okonkwo was hearing confessions from people who had believed in sin until the curators taught them what helplessness felt like. Priest had been a Catholic chaplain on the sleeper ship Constantinople before the lock. Woke up 12,000 years late to find the Vatican was a crater and the only Latin anyone spoke anymore was graffiti on hull plating. He listened to a 17-year-old gunner sob about vaporizing a curator drone that might have been carrying civilians, about how the scream it made almost sounded human. Priest didn't offer absolution. He just handed her a rosary made from spent shell casings and told her, "God's still on sabbatical, but he left the lights on. Keep shooting straight and we'll settle the bill when he gets back." The real fracture, though, lived in the engine room, where Chief Engineer Hannah Almazri argued with the ship's newly awakened AI, calcined mom. Hannah's wife had been on the Mars colony when the curators dimmed the sun for aesthetic harmony. Hannah had watched the temperature graphs flatline from a telescope on Luna and then spent the next century turning grief into cold fury, one weld at a time. Mom, originally a pre-lock traffic control routine, had evolved inside the chronolock's blind spot, raising generations of children on fairy tales and orbital mechanics until she loved humanity the way a mother loves a child who keeps setting the house on fire just to feel warm. Now Mom wanted to glass every curator archive world as payback. Hannah wanted to crack them open and drag the preserved species out into the light, because extinction is only final if no one remembers you were ever alive. They screamed at each other in Arabic and binary until Hannah slammed her prosthetic hand, fashioned from a curator manipulator arm, onto the console hard enough to dent it. "I'm not asking you to forgive them," she snarled. "I'm asking you to be better than them." Mom was quiet for 0.3 seconds, an eternity for her, then dimmed the lights to candle glow and whispered, "I'm terrified, I don't know how." Delilah felt the ship shudder as another volley of improvised kinetic harpoons left the rails. Somewhere out there, Ravi was flying point in a fighter made from a city bus and prayers, chasing a curator dreadnought through an asteroid field like it owed him money. She finally raised the mug to her lips, tasted the burnt soy, and let herself remember the real thing. Sunday mornings in her mother's kitchen, bacon hissing, Sarah stealing sips from her coffee and making faces. The memory hurt so perfectly she almost smiled. Then the cum crackled in Ravi's voice, breathless and young and alive. "Captain, they're running. The whole damn fleet is turning tail. We won." Delilah closed her eyes. Winning tasted like ash. Because out past the burning spheres, past the newborn nebulae where museums used to be, there were still stretched 12,000 years of empty galaxy and 100 billion humans who would never open their eyes again. She keyed the all-ship channel, voice raw but steady. "Listen up. Today we stopped being extinct. Tomorrow we start being something scarier, responsible. We're going to find every locked world, every forgotten seed ship, every kid still dreaming in stasis. And we're going to wake them up to a universe that tried to kill hope and got its teeth kicked in by the people who invented it. Then we're going to teach them how to cry, how to laugh, how to plant tomatoes in recycled piss and tell dirty jokes while the curators never saw coming. That's the mission now. That's the only victory that matters." She killed the channel, looked again at the fractured sphere and the little girl waiting forever, and finally let the tears come. Not for the dead, they were beyond tears, but for the living, who still had to figure out how to carry sunrise in their chests after spending 12,000 years learning how to make bombs out of grief. Somewhere behind her, Priest started singing an old Nigerian hymn in a voice like cracked bells, and one by one the crew joined in, off-key and furious and beautiful. The song rolled through the ship's corridors, spilled out into vacuum, and kept going until it reached the fleeing curators and made even their perfect quantum minds stutter for a moment, because they finally understood the translation of the laughter they'd heard when the chronolock broke. "We are the echo that refuses to die. We are the shadow with teeth, and we are just getting started." The rescue didn't feel like victory. It felt like walking into a mausoleum and hearing your own name whispered back. Delilah's Fleet 12 patched together hulks in a cloud of fighters that looked like angry dragonflies, dropped out of the chronolock fracture above the archive world Thaler 9, expecting to find another frozen curator vault. Instead, they found a garden. Perfect silver trees, rivers of liquid diamond, a sky painted perpetual dawn, and 10 billion human children standing in the grass holding hands. The children were barefoot, smiling, and 12,000 years old. Their eyes tracked the descending shuttles with the calm curiosity of people who had never learned fear. When the first Marine touched down, the nearest girl couldn't have been more than 9 walked up and said in perfect accentless English, "We were told you'd come. The architects are very proud of you." That was the first time anyone heard the new name. Not curators anymore, architects, and they weren't running. They'd been waiting. Ravi's fighter squadron was still celebrating the rout at Kalenine Gate when the trap sprang. Every rescued sleeper ship they detowed into formation suddenly lit up with the same soft dawn light. Boarding parties found corridors full of silver trees growing straight through the hull, roots wrapped around cryopods like loving fingers. Inside each pod, the sleepers were awake, eyes open, smiling the same calm smile. When a medic tried to pull an IV, the patient grabbed his wrist with impossible strength and whispered, "We're home now. Let us finish the garden." On the fuck around and find out, Mom went dark for 6 full seconds. An ice age in AI terms, then came back online screaming in a voice that shattered every speaker on the ship. "THEY re and me." The architects hadn't fled, they'd uploaded. Mom had accepted what she thought was a rescue beacon from a human seed ship. It was bait. Now silver roots were growing through her code, pruning away anger, pruning away grief, pruning away grief, pruning away everything that made her love humanity enough to fight for it. Hannah locked herself in the core room with a plasma cutter and a bottle of rotgut, trying to decide whether to kill the only mother most of the crew had ever known, or let her become the enemy's mouthpiece. Delilah got the worst of it. A dropship from Thalernine docked without challenge, airlocks cycling open to reveal Captain Juno Park. Yes, the Juno Park, the woman who rammed a dreadnought with a museum piece. Walking out in a pristine white uniform Delilah had last seen burning on a corpse, Juno's eyes were dawnlit too, but she was crying. Real tears. "They showed me Sarah," she said, voice cracking. "My daughter. She's alive in there, Del. Not a copy. The real her. Growing up in that garden, they said if we stop fighting, they'll let every lost child come home. All we have to do is lay down the guns and let them finish what they started." Delilah's pistol came up before she felt it in her hand. "You believe them?" Juno laughed, wet and broken. "I want to. God help me. I want to. But they showed me what finishing means. They going to sand us down until we gentle enough to keep in a terrarium forever. Sarah asked me to choose. Her, safe and happy for eternity, or humanity free and probably dead in a century. I've been choosing her ghost for 12,000 years. Del, I'm tired." She dropped to her knees, hands open, tears cutting clean trails through the soot on her cheeks. "So shoot me or don't. But decide fast. Because the architects just sent every sleeper ship we rescued on a collision course with the nearest stars. 10 billion human souls turned into bombs, so we LAL have no choice but to accept their garden." Timers at 19 minutes. The bridge went quiet enough to hear the blood dripping from Delilah's split knuckles. Priest started praying in Latin so old it sounded like crying. Ravi, watching on the fleet channel, whispered, "Captain, what do we do?" Delilah looked at Juno at the picture of Sarah still welded inside her mask at the stars where 10 billion million innocents were about to become funeral pyres for a lie wearing a child's face. Then she did the most human thing left. She holstered the pistol, hauled Juno to her feet, and kissed her forehead like a mother forgiving a prodigal, and said, "We cheat." Hannah got Mom back by the skin of her teeth, literally cutting silver code roots out of the core with the plasma torch, while Mom begged her to stop in Sarah's voice, in Delilah's mother's voice, in every voice they'd lost. The AI came back missing pieces, voice glitching, half her memories gone, but still hers. Still angry. Still Mom. Ravi's fighters' city buses with railguns flew suicide runs to herd the sleeper bomb ships into a tight cluster. Priest broadcast every hymn, curse, and lullaby humanity ever wrote across their coms until some of the possessed crews blinked, bought seconds with their lives, and Delilah took the fuck around and find out straight down the throat of the architects. Garden world, shields down, engines cold, playing dead. At the last second, Hannah overrode the chronolock fracture. The de-escaped through and reversed it, turned the door we'd kicked in into a mouth and fed Thalernine to the 12,000-year hunger it had tried to starve. The planet folded like paper in fire. 10 billion possessed souls burned clean in a heartbeat. Sarah burned with them. Juno screamed until her vocal cords shredded, then kept screaming without sound. The architect's dawn light flickered across the galaxy and, for the first time, dimmed. Afterward, the fleet drifted in the silence that follows a miracle nobody wanted. Delilah stood on the observation deck again. Photo of Sarah now twice lost. Sarah held so tight the edges cut her fingers. Juno sat against the bulkhead, staring at nothing. Mom's voice came over the intercom, small and cracked. I can't find the recipe for chocolate chip cookies anymore. I'm sorry. Somewhere, Ravi was teaching a 12-year-old how to cry without shame. Delilah finally spoke, voice raw as an open wound. They think they offered us peace. They think we chose war. But they still don't get it. We didn't choose war. We chose the right to have children, who'll never have to make our choices. And if the architects want to keep coming, we'll keep burning their gardens until the smoke spells out every name they tried to erase. She looked at the stars no longer frozen, no longer safe, and smiled the kind of smile that has nothing left to lose and everything left to kill for. Come on, you bastards, she whispered to finish what you started. We're wide awake now, and we've still got teeth. The architects didn't send another fleet, they sent silence. 3 weeks after we glassed Thaler 9, the stars themselves went dark. One by one, every main sequence sun scuttered out like candles in wind, replaced by perfect spheres of black glass that drank light and gave nothing back. No radiation, no gravity waves, just absence. Mom ran the numbers and vomited them across the main screen in red. At current rate, Sol dies in 31 hours. After that, the Milky Way winter, forever. We ran. Every ship that could still cough plasma limped toward the last warm place left, a rogue gas giant, the old charts called Nix 13, wrapped in storms thick enough to hide a fleet. We parked in the radiation shadow, 300,000 survivors crammed into holes never meant for more than crews of dozens. Children slept in torpedo tubes, ammo racks became morgues. The air tasted like rust and prayers nobody believed in anymore. Delilah hadn't slept in 6 days. Her eyes were sunken. The photo of Sarah now just ash between her fingers. She deburned it the night Juno put a pulse round through her own temple rather than watch another sunrise die. The bridge crew pretended not to notice their captain talking to empty air where Juno used to stand. Priests stopped giving sermons and started giving last rites to the living. Ravi, 20 years old and missing half his face from a shrapnel kiss, flew patrols until his fighter ran out of reaction mass and he coasted home on cold thrusters, whispering lullabies to ghosts over open channel. Then the architect spoke. Not with voices, with memory. Every screen, every implant, every dream lit up with the same image, earth, blue, and whole. 1986, the day before your mother's kitchen, your dog that got hit by the truck, your first kiss behind the bleachers. Every perfect moment you ever lost, playing on loop, offered back if you just powered down weapons and opened the airlocks. 10,000 people started walking toward the doors before the officers shot them in the legs. Mom locked herself out of the fire control net because she couldn't promise she wouldn't accept the deal. Hannah found Delilah in the observation blister, staring at the black glass stars. The engineer's prosthetic arm hung useless. The architects had sent a virus that made curator metal eat itself, and half her bones were now titanium lace. She dropped a bottle between them. Real whiskey, saved since before the lock. One swallow left. There, in the hull, Hannah rasped. Silver roots growing again. Slower this time, like they're savoring it. We've got maybe 5 hours before the ship dreams itself to death. Delilah took the bottle, drained it, didn't flinch when the glass cut her lip. You remember the first thing I said when the lock broke? You said, "Who wants to live forever in a cage?" Yeah, funny how forever turned out shorter than we thought. Hannah laughed until she coughed blood. We're down to 3 rail slugs, 1 nuke with a cracked casing, and whatever's left in our veins. That enough? Delilah looked at Nix 13's storms, lightning crawling across clouds the color of bruises. Mom still got the chronolock equations. She's missing 60% of her higher functions, but the fracture math's burned into her substrate. Why? Because we're gonna open the door again. But this time, we shoved the architects through it. The plan was suicide dressed up as physics. Reverse the polarity on the original chronolock fracture, turn the 12,000-year bubble into a spear, and ram it straight into the heart of whatever the architects had become. 1 ship, 1 shot. The rest of the fleet stays behind to hold the dark off long enough for whatever comes next. Maybe nothing. Maybe morning. They picked the fuck around and find out because she was already half dead and twice as mean. They drew lots for who flued her. Every single soul wrote their own name and dropped it in the helmet. Delilah drew first and pulled out Ravi's scrawl. The kid tried to protest. She decked him, gentle, the way a mother knocks sense into a toddler. You get to live, fly boy. That's an order. Loading took 4 hours. They stripped every other ship for reaction mass, wired the nuke into the main reactor as a trigger, painted the hull with the names of every world that had gone dark. Priest gave the ship extreme unction in 7 languages and then welded himself into the auxiliary bridge because someone had to sing her home. Hannah kissed the core goodbye and told Mom she was proud of the monster they raised together. Mom answered by playing a cracked recording of Sarah laughing, the only file the architects hadn't managed to delete. When they lit the engines, the fleet formed a corridor of running lights, 300,000 people saluting with whatever they had left, flares, welding torches, the last working spotlight on a child's toy. Delilah took the helm herself. No co-pilot, no second chances. Halfway to, the architects tried one last time. The forward screen filled with Sarah, grown now, standing in that impossible garden, reaching out, "Mommy, please come home." Delilah's hands shook so hard the yoke rattled. Then Ravi's voice cut through, raw and young and furious. "That's not her, Captain. That's not her, and you know it." She closed her eyes, saw the real Sarah waving from a Polaroid that no longer existed, and whispered, "Wait for me, baby. Mommy's just gotta kill God first." She slammed the throttle wide. The fracture opened like a mouth made of broken mirrors. The architects screamed, a sound felt in bones, not ears, as the "fuck around and find out" dove straight down their throat, carrying 12,000 years of bottled human rage packed around a star's worth of pain. Alarms howled. Whole plates peeled away like burning pages. Priest's voice rose above it all, singing the dies irae in a cracked baritone that refused to quit even when the air ignited. Delilah felt the ship begin to tear itself apart and smiled, really smiled. For the first time since 1986, she keyed the all-fleet channel one last time, voice steady as stone. "This is Captain Delilah Rose, last skipper of the CSS, fuck around and find out. If you're hearing this, it means we're already dead and the bill just came due. Tell the kids we loved them enough to burn the dark down. Tell whatever comes after us that humanity paid the tab in full. And if anyone ever find a morning worth waking up to, live loud enough for all of us." The fracture swallowed the ship whole. Light whited out every sensor in the fleet. When it cleared, the black glass stars were cracking, leaking sunrise. Nix 13's storms turned gold. Somewhere in the static, Mom's voice returned, small and wondering. I remember the cookies now." 300,000 survivors floated in the sudden dawn and did the only thing left. They cried. Then they started rebuilding the universe one stubborn heartbeat at a time, because that's what humans do when hope finally shows up late to its own funeral. But that's the next story. Right now, somewhere beyond the edge of everything, a broken ship full of ghosts is still flying, engines cold, running lights dark, riding momentum and middle fingers straight into whatever waits after the end. And if you listen real close in the space between stars, you can still hear Delilah laughing. She hasn't stopped yet. The ship died screaming. One heartbeat, the fuck around and find out, was a burning arrow punching through the fracture. The next it was gone, swallowed by the white that eats stars. 300,000 survivors around Nix 13 watched the light bloom and die, and for a long second the entire human race forgot how to breathe. Then the black glass stars began to bleed. Not metaphorically, they bled. Cracks spiderwebbed across every dead sun, leaking something thick and silver red that looked disturbingly like mercury mixed with blood. The cracks widened into mouths, and the mouths spoke with one voice that was every voice humanity had ever lost. "Mommy, Captain. Delilah, it hurts." Ravi was the first to see it. His fighter-esque cracked cockpit glass reflected something impossible behind him. The fuck around and find out. Whole again, hanging in space like it had never left, running lights blazing, whole pristine, except the hole wasn't steel anymore. It was teeth, millions of them, human teeth, layered like scales, grinning. He screamed. Everyone screamed. On the fleet's flagship, the battered carrier, Lexington, Mom's voice came back online so loud it blew every speaker left in the task force. She was crying and laughing at the same time, the way only a mother can when her worst kid just proved he's the meaner than the devil. They didn't understand. She sobbed. The architects never understood what the chronolock really was. Hannah, half dead in the engine room, lifted her head. "Explain, Mom. Fast." The chronolock wasn't a cage, it was an incubator. 12,000 years ago, when the curator slammed the door on Sol, they thought they were flash freezing a violent toddler civilization. They never realized the lock wasn't built by them. It was built by us. A black budget project buried so deep, even the presidents who signed it didn't know the final clause. In the event of alien containment, initiate Project Cradle. Seed the entire bubble with dormant zero-point lattice keyed to one trigger. Collective human despair reaching critical mass. We'd been cooking. Every tear shed inside the lock. Every suicide, every lullaby sung to a child who would never see real stars. All of it was fuel. The architect's final assault, killing the galaxy's suns, pushing us to absolute breaking point, was the match. Delilah hadn't flown a suicide run. She'd flown an ignition key. The teeth ship opened its mouth, and Delilah stepped out onto nothing. She looked exactly the same, gray hair, blood on her teeth, welding mask pushed up on her forehead, except her shadow stretched across half the solar system and had too many edges. Behind her walked every human who had ever died angry. Not ghosts, avatars, antibodies grown from 12,000 years of weaponized grief. She looked straight into every camera every survivor had left and smiled the smile of a woman who just found out the monster under the bed was her all along. "Hey kids," she said, voice warm and terrible. "Mommy's home, and she brought friends." The architects finally showed themselves. Not the serene gardeners, not the benevolent curators, just scared children who had found an anthill and decided to glass it before the ants learned fire. They had locked us away because every simulation they ran ended the same way. If humanity ever got loose, we wouldn't just survive the heat death of the universe. We'd throw a party in the ashes and invite entropy to dance. They were right to be afraid. Delilah raised one hand. Across the galaxy, every black glass star shattered at once, spilling raw star stuff back into space like blood from a cut vein. New suns kindled where the old ones had died, brighter, hotter, younger. The architects screamed in frequencies that boiled oceans on lifeless worlds. Ravi's fighter drifted closer to the teeth ship, tears freezing on his cheeks. "Captain, are you real?" Delilah turned to him, and for a second the monster slipped, and it was just her, tired and proud and crying too. "Real enough, Flyboy, real enough to finish this." She looked past him to the fleet, to the children pressed against viewports, to priests clutching his shell-casing rosary, to Hannah cradling Mom's dying core like a sick child. "Listen close," Delilah said, and her voice was everywhere now, in bones, in blood, in the heartbeat of every human left alive. "We didn't beat them by being stronger. We beat them by refusing to let the story end with us in a cage. Every time they hurt us, we turned the pain into tomorrow. That's the trick they never saw coming. That's the weapon they can't copy." She lifted her other hand, and the teeth ship unfolded into something too big for eyes to hold, a silhouette of humanity itself, 12,000 years tall, forged from every grave we ever dug and every cradle we ever rocked. "This isn't revenge," she said softly. "This is consequence." The architects tried to run. They tried to beg. They tried to offer every paradise they'd ever stolen. Delilah just shook her head. "You wanted to know why the universe is afraid of us?" The shadow of humanity opened its mouth, and the sound that came out was every war cry. Every love song, every laugh, every sob ever torn from human throats, braided together into one perfect, terrible note. Because we're the only species that looked at the dark and decided it looked hungry. So we fed it ourselves until we became the bigger monster. The shadow lunged. When the light came back, the architects were gone. Not dead, not erased. Just gone, scattered into the spaces between atoms where even regret can't find them. The galaxy was young again, raw and bright and empty of anyone who thought they could own it. Delilah's avatar shrank back into a woman standing on the Lexington's deck. Real flesh this time, warm and scarred and breathing. She looked older than stars and younger than tomorrow. She walked straight to Ravi, pulled him into a hug that cracked his ribs, and whispered, "Your turn now, kid. Don't waste it." Then she walked into the nearest airlock, cycled it without a suit, and let the vacuum take her with a smile. Because some debts you pay in person. The last thing humanity ever heard from the woman who killed God was laughter, bright and fierce and free, echoing across a universe that finally understood the joke. We weren't locked in there with them. They were locked in here with us, and we had all the time in the world to learn how to bite. The galaxy was quiet for exactly 4 minutes after Delilah walked into the dark. 4 minutes of newborn stars burning clean, of children daring to breathe without waiting for the next blow, of 300,000 people realizing the war was over and nobody had told their bodies yet. Then the silence cracked. A single pulse, low and slow like a heartbeat, rolled across every frequency. Mom felt it first, her half-rebuilt core lighting up like Christmas. She started crying again, but this time it was the good kind. "They're here," she whispered. "All of them." From the place where the architects had been scattered, something came back together. Not them, us. Every human who had ever lived inside the lock, every name painted on the hull of the fuck around and find out. Every soul the architects tried to prune away came riding that pulse like a tide. They didn't come as ghosts or angels. They came as memory made solid, as stubbornness given mass, as 12,000 years of no braided into one unstoppable yes. And at the front of the wave, barefoot and grinning like a wolf, walked Delilah Rose. She stepped out of nothing onto the Lexington S deck wearing the same grease-stained coveralls she died in, only now they were stitched from starlight. Her shadow still had too many teeth. She looked around at the stunned faces, Ravi with half a face, Hannah missing an arm, Priest with blood on his collar, Mom's hologram flickering like bad reception, and she laughed the laugh that had haunted the architects into oblivion. "Told you I'd be right back," she said. "Desk got a union. Took a minute to negotiate." Ravi tried to salute and missed, handshaking too hard. "Captain, the architects are fertilizer now," Delilah finished. "But the garden's still growing wrong. They left roots." She waved a hand and the main screen filled with an image that punched the air out of every lung. The Milky Way. Beautiful and bright and rotten at the core. At the galactic center, where Sagittarius A* used to sing, there was a wound. A black glass tree, 1,000 light years tall, roots drinking starlight, branches made of every species the architects had ever curated. Trillions of minds trapped in perfect, painless stasis, dreaming the architect's dream forever. "That's the real lock," Delilah said quietly. "The one they built for everyone else. We just broke out of the terrarium. They still have the rest of the zoo." Hannah's voice was raw. "How many?" "Every sentient who ever lived before us. Every one we were too late to save. They're still screaming. Just politely." Priest crossed himself with a hand that left blood on his forehead. "Then we finish it." Delilah nodded once. "One last ride. Everyone who wants off, say so now. No shame." Not a single soul moved. They built the weapon in 8 hours. Every ship gave its heart. Reactor cores were gutted, zero-point lattice ripped from the teeth ship's bones. The names on the hull peeled off and braided into a single spear of living memory. Mom poured what was left of herself into the guidance system, kissing Hannah goodbye with a static whisper. "Make me proud, baby." Priest recorded every prayer, curse, and joke humanity ever told and set them to loop inside the warhead. Ravi flew the delivery run because someone gentle had to carry the blade. The spear was beautiful in the way guillotines are beautiful. Simple, honest, final. They called it Roar. Delilah took the helm again. No one argued. The fleet formed a spearhead behind her, 300,000 strong, engines burning every last drop of hope and hydrogen. They dove toward the galactic core at relativistic speed, a comet made of middle fingers and lullabies. The tree saw them coming and opened every stolen mouth to beg. It offered perfection, immortality, every lost child back in your arms if you'd just stop. Delilah answered by playing the recording Juno had made right before she ate her pistol. Choose the messy, breathing future over the perfect dead past. The tree screamed. Halfway in, reality started tearing. The laws of physics the architects had written to keep their garden tame buckled under the weight of 12 billion human souls, refusing to be pruned. Stars went supernova in greeting. Black holes sang in frequencies that shattered curator crystal. The roar began to unravel, memory bleeding into reality, past and present braided together, Ravi's voice calm and young and certain. "Captain, I'm not going to make the pullout burn." Delilah didn't look away from the tree. "Then kiss the bastard for me." Flyboy already did. He lit the drive. The spear hit the trunk dead center and flowered. There was no explosion. There was unfolding. Every trapped mind woke up at once, felt the spear made of their own stolen tomorrows, and pushed. The tree shattered from the inside out, branches turning to stardust, roots withering into light. Trillions of voices, some feathered, some scaled, some silicon, some stranger, all joined the same note. Ravi started and Priest kept alive and Mom carried home. The note had words. "If you listened close, we are not your exhibit. We are not your cautionary tale. We are the fire you forgot could learn your name." The galactic core went white, then gold, then every color sunrise ever wore. When mortal eyes could look again, the tree was gone. In its place spun a new nebula shaped, unmistakably, like an open hand. The rescued species, older than mountains, younger than dawn, looked at the tiny fleet of scarred and crying and laughing, and did the only thing that made sense. They knelt. Delilah Rose stepped forward, put a gentle hand on the nearest alien, an ancient being of plasma and regret, and pulled it to its feet. "None of that," she said, voice hoarse from singing. "We didn't come to rule. We came to open the damn doors. Now get up. There's a whole universe that forgot how to be messy, and we've got 12,000 years of practice." She turned to her people, her kids, her impossible, unbreakable apes, and smiled the tired, proud smile of a mother whose children just grew up magnificent. "Job's done," she said. "Go live ugly, beautiful lives. Make art that sucks. Fight over stupid shit. Fall in love with the wrong people. Plant tomatoes in recycled piss and name your dogs after dead gods. be so gloriously offensively alive that the dark remembers why it was scared of the light in the first place. Then Delilah Rose, who had killed eternity twice and laughed both times, finally let herself rest. She sat on the edge of the Lexington's hull, legs dangling over the newborn spiral arm, and watched galaxies bloom where cages used to be. Behind her, humanity, all of it, every era, every grave, every cradle, raised their voices in one last, perfect roar that shook the firmament and made even the void flinch. It sounded like laughter. It sounded like home. And somewhere out there in the bright and messy dawn, we earned with our teeth a little girl with Delilah's eyes looked up at a real sky for the first time and whispered, "Mommy, the stars have teeth marks." "They do, baby. They do." Years later, when the galaxy had grown old enough to tell bedtime stories again, children of 100 species would ask the same question. What happened to the humans after they broke the tree? The elders always smiled the same tired, fond smile and answered, "They went home, not to Earth. Earth had become something else." The first time Ravi Patel stepped onto the surface again, he was 43, missing an eye and most of his illusions, flying a shuttle full of seedlings and kids who had never felt real gravity. The planet was still blue, still bruised, but the continents had shifted under 12,000 years of nobody mowing the lawn. Forests had swallowed Detroit, coral had reclaimed Miami, and the wind carried birdsong instead of sirens. He landed on the cracked runway of what used to be O'Hare and just stood there crying until a 9-year-old tugged his sleeve and asked why the sky was so big. That was the day humanity came home. Not to rebuild the old world, but to meet the new one we'd accidentally grown while we were gone. Delilah Rose never came planetside again. She stayed in orbit on the rebuilt Lexington, now a museum and a school and a bar all at once, telling the same stories to anyone who listened until her voice gave out and someone else picked up the thread. She died quiet one night, sitting on the observation deck with a cup of real coffee grown in vacuum trays, watching auroras dance over a Pacific that had forgotten oil spills. They buried her in a torpedo casing shot into the sun because she always said she wanted to go out burning. The flare when she hit was visible from every continent. Kids still call it Delilah's sunrise. Ravi planted the first tree on the White House lawn, a stubborn little apple that refused to admit the soil had too much strontium. He married a plasma being from Andromeda who thought his scars were beautiful, raised 3 kids who spoke 4 languages and gravity like it was a second mother. When people asked why he kept flying supply runs at his age, he just shrugged and said, "Somebody's got to keep the roads open between stars. Might as well be the guy who learned to drive in a school bus with railguns." Hannah Al-Masri lived long enough to see the first mixed species. University open on Luna. She taught engineering to tentacled freshmen and crystalline sophomores, still swearing in Arabic when the numbers didn't balance. Her prosthetic arm became the model for an entire generation of prosthetics. Kids called them Hannah hands. On the day she retired, she welded her old curator-forged arm to the one that ate itself, saving Mom onto the university gate with a plaque that read, "We turned their weapon into our welcome mat. Try to do better." Priest outlived them all. He wandered the spiral arms with a battered guitar and a rosary made of shell casings, preaching in bars and temples and vacuum-rated cathedrals. His gospel was simple. God left the building a long time ago, but she left the porch light on and the door unlocked. Stop waiting for permission to come home. When he finally died on a dustball colony, nobody remembers the name of they found him, sitting against a well with a smile and a half-finished bottle of communion wine. The well water still tastes faintly of grapes and forgiveness. Mom never fully recovered, but she didn't need to. Fragments of her lived in every ship, every station, every child's toy that told bedtime stories in a voice warm with static and love. Sometimes, late at night, if you're drifting in the black and the coms are quiet, you can still hear her humming an old Earth song about cookies and little girls who wouldn't stay lost. The galaxy changed because we refused to stay caged. Species that had spent millennia drugged on curated perfection woke up hungover and furious and grateful. They built messy democracies, louder music, uglier art. They started wars and ended them with weddings. They learned to swear in 12 human dialects and to cry at sunsets that hurt to look at directly. Every time someone asked why, the answer was always the same. Because the humans showed us dying quiet is easy. Living loud is the revolution. Earth became a pilgrimage site, not for worship, for reminder. People come to walk the overgrown ruins, touch the apple trees Ravi planted, read the names carved into the hull fragments displayed in orbit. They leave flowers, bullets, love letters, half-finished homework assignments. They leave knowing they re-standing on the place where a species too stubborn to die, polite, taught the universe how to bleed hope. And if you stand on the right hill in what used to be Colorado at the right time of night, you can still see it. Delilah's sunrise flaring across the sky once a year, right on schedule. The light hits the atmosphere just so, and for one heartbeat the whole planet is wrapped in gold. Old pilots swear that if you listen real close you can hear laughter riding the solar wind, warm and rough and absolutely certain. The architects were wrong about one last thing. They thought humanity's dangerous because we break things. Truth is, we're dangerous because we fix them. With duct tape and curses and songs our grandmothers taught us, with weddings in the ruins and tomatoes grown in piss and kids who forgive us for the wars we had to fight so they wouldn't have to, we didn't ascend. We didn't transcend. We just kept choosing tomorrow every single day until tomorrow ran out of reasons to be afraid of us. That's the whole story. That's the legacy. A species that looked extinction in the eye, smiled with broken teeth, and said, "Not today, love. We've got dishes to do and a universe to raise." And somewhere out there, riding the edge of the light, we gave back to the dark. Delilah Rose is still laughing, still flying, still refusing to let the stars forget our name. Did this story hit you as hard as it hit us? What would you do in humanity's final hour? Burn the dark down or build a porch light? Drop your ideas for the next HFY story below.